In 2013, the Library of Congress commissioned a study to determine just how many films had been preserved during the silent film era, which lasted from around the late 1890s to 1929. In the report, it states, there is no single number for existing American silent era feature films, as the surviving copies vary in format and completeness. There are 1,575 titles making up 14%, surviving as the complete domestic release version in 35mm. Another 1,174, making up 11%, are complete but not the original. They are either a foreign release version in 35mm or in a 28 or 16mm small gauge print with less than 35mm image quality. Another 562 titles, making up 5%, are incomplete, missing either a portion of the film or an abridged version. The remaining 70% are believed to be completely lost. Why there are so many lost films is due to a number of reasons. Back then, studios used nitrate films for their movies, which is known to be very flammable and easy to decay. As a result, several film studios, vaults, and institutions suffered bad fires from the material, which included companies like RKO, Universal, and Warner Brothers, at least according to the Smithsonian Magazine. Another reason I saw was that some film studios simply got rid of the movies themselves because, at the time, they didn't think movies would really have any value or gain beyond their theatrical run, and instead of spending the money and resources to pile them up in warehouses, they just got rid of them entirely. And then of course there are other more minor reasons like simple mishandlings and losing film. Some people just full on forgot the existence of some films, possibly due to their obscurity or lack of recognition, and so on and so forth. With so much American film history just gone with no archives or any way to preserve them, it's no surprise there were a few examples of lost dinosaur films as well. As I look more and more into dinosaur film history, I realize that we've experienced more losses than I initially thought, most of which seem to have come from the early 1900s. As unfortunate as it is that we'll likely never get to see these movies again, it's nice to know they were documented in one way or another. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. One of these examples dates back as early as 1908, the title of which was The Prehistoric Man. Based on a few sources, we know the film was a 6-minute UK comedy short from November of 1908, directed by British magician Walter R. Booth, whose filmography dates back as early as 1899. It was also produced by a company known as the Charles Urban Trading Company, which was founded in 1903 and were primarily known for their documentaries about science and travel, but also produced several science fiction works as well. And that's pretty much the gist of the behind the scenes for the movie. Due to how old and possibly obscure it was, there's not much else to its history. But according to the trade journal The Moving Picture World, which was dedicated to talking about film from the early 1900s, the Prehistoric Man features an artist that draws a caveman that ends up coming to life and attaches himself to his creator and now goes wherever he goes. As the Prehistoric Man explores the modern city with his creator, he also gets into a lot of trouble. He partakes in a bit of tomfoolery, if you will. According to the synopsis, so disastrous is the havoc he creates in 20th century streets, houses, and lanes, and so fearful the impression that the unlucky artist in vain tries to escape. The gaunt, incongruous figure is not to be shaken off. Because of all the trolling the Prehistoric Man has done and the fact that he can't get away from him, the artist comes up with the idea of drawing a prehistoric animal, presumably a dinosaur of some kind, which also comes to life and proceeds to eat the Prehistoric Man. What this dinosaur is, I have no idea. Again, the short is considered to be lost, and I haven't been able to find any kind of visual reference to it, which explains why it's been forgotten after all these years. But based on what I've read about it, the prehistoric animal that's drawn to eat the caveman is supposed to be some kind of dinosaur. I'm not really sure how they went about bringing the caveman and the dinosaur to life, but this was during the time where filmmakers had to use a lot of tricks and methods to accomplish certain special effects, and Walter R. Booth was known for performing his own tricks in his time working on film. In 1901, he made a film called Artistic Creation where, just like the Prehistoric Man, an artist's painting comes to life. In this film, the artist paints a woman, first drawing the head, which suddenly comes to life. He places it on the chair next to him and proceeds to draw the rest of the woman's body, eventually completing her, and then proceeds to draw a baby as well. The Prehistoric Man is also said to have live-action parts, so it's possible that, using the same techniques as artistic creation, Booth had the artist create the caveman on paper who came to life as a real caveman before being eaten by a dinosaur that's also drawn by the same artist, with the caveman being an actual person and maybe the dinosaur being a prop of some kind. In terms of bringing dinosaurs to life in films, the silent era marked the first appearances of stop-motion dinosaurs. In the early 1900s, Willis OBrien would make his rounds with his stop-motion projects, helping create movies like 1918's The Ghost of Slumber Mountain and 1925's The Lost World. But before these projects, he would begin his line of work through directing and animating several slapstick shorts from 1915 to 1920, a lot of which took place during prehistoric times and featured caveman and dinosaurs. These shorts included The Dinosaur and the Missing Link, A Prehistoric Tragedy, Prehistoric Poultry, and RFD 10,000 BC. But among this list are also a couple of entries that are now unfortunately lost. One that comes to mind was Curious Pets of Our Ancestors from 1917. Unfortunately, I really can't tell you much about this film because information about it is seriously lacking. And the one description I was able to find states, a little known entry in Willis OBrien's series of slapstick shorts, and possibly the last one to feature prehistoric animals. And that's it. It's a very vague description that doesn't really give out a whole lot of details as to what it could be, but this is likely another 4 to 6 minute short that features slapstick comedy brought to life with stop motion animation. If I could give a guess, I'd say, given from the title, Curious Pets of Our Ancestors, it's possible the short could have been focused on domesticated or pet dinosaurs that would have probably caused trouble for our caveman protagonists, leading to some more slapstick. It would be safe to assume something like this since we've seen it before in a few of his other dinosaur films prior to this one, but at the end of the day, it is just a guess. But this wasn't the only one of OBrien's shorts that are now lost. Another was The Birth of Flivver. No video format or images of this short seem to have surfaced nowadays, but there is a handful of information known about it. Like all of his other silent shorts made during this point in time, The Birth of Flivver was made by Edison Conquest Pictures, and it was made to be only about 5 minutes long. Unfortunately, this one also doesn't have much about it on the internet, at least that I can find. One description states that it's about a pair of cavemen that try to get a brontosaurus to pull their cart after they invent wheels for it, but the brontosaurus is too stubborn to listen, and so the cavemen give up and I guess ditch the wheel idea. Yeah, not much with these last couple of examples, but it's to be expected for silent shorts in this point in time. From my understanding, they typically don't exceed around 5 to 6 minutes, so that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for any kind of major storytelling, but it is a good way to produce small-scaled projects such as these. Moving away from OBrien's work, another lost film that I was surprised to learn about was the original film adaptation to Jules Verne's book Journey to the Center of the Earth, which was written in 1864. I'm sure that Journey to the Center of the Earth is up there with being one of the most adapted Jules Verne book, but I didn't know the earliest film iteration of it was made all the way back in 1909 as a 9-minute short, before eventually making its worldwide debut in 1910 by a French cinema company under the Pathé Frères business. During the early 1900s, when film and special effects were still in its infancy, filmmakers had to get creative when it came to displaying certain effects on screen to essentially trick the audience into thinking it's realistic. One person that was remembered well for his contributions in special effects was Spanish filmmaker Segundo de Chamon, who's made a lot of silent shorts from the early 1900s. One of these movies was a film adaptation to Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth that he made in 1909, which at the time, depending on where you were watching the movie from, went by its alternative titles A Journey to the Middle of the Earth or Inside the Earth. According to a synopsis, again from the moving picture world, a couple of Englishmen reach the middle of the earth accompanied by their guides. Here, they find huge caverns covered with stalactites with gigantic mushrooms springing up spontaneously. Elephants innumerable, huge frogs, crocodiles, and other monsters appear suddenly, and the travelers flee in terror. After passing through streams of molten lava and fire, they manage to return as if by miracle to the face of the earth again. Now, admittedly, there's no mention of anything prehistoric or dinosaur related, but the synopsis does say that there were other monsters. Maybe those other monsters were dinosaurs. The world may never know. Plus, maybe the animals that were featured had prehistoric origins. Who knows? The original book had a lot of prehistoric creatures within it, so it wouldn't be unreasonable to make the assumption that some of the featured animals were probably trying to be passed off as extinct creatures, but of course, this is nothing more than speculation. Another lost dinosaur movie was The Savage from 1926, which was actually an adaptation of a short story by the same name written by Ernest Pascual. The American film production company First National Pictures had purchased the rights from Pascual for $4,000 and used it to make a motion picture out of it. What resulted was a 50-minute comedy movie that's about a man named Danny Terry who works as an animal expert for a scientific magazine. He finds out his competitors from a rival science magazine are taking an expedition to the Mariposa Islands, and so pretends to be a white savage in the hopes that his competitors publish the hoax in their magazine and ruin their reputation. When his competitors eventually find him, they bring him back to New York, but as they leave the island, a troublesome brontosaurus follows after them, which you'd think would be the better discovery between that and a savage, but the crew still seemed determined to take Terry back to New York, where they put him on display, and when the time comes for him and his associates to expose the hoax, he refuses as he had fallen in love with the woman who was a part of the expedition named Jezebel, and after she finds out that he's not really a savage, she falls in love with him too, I guess. As you'd already expect by now, there's not much to say about this movie. However, unlike the rest of the ones that are listed for this video, this is the only one that seems to have any kind of surviving visual reference of the movie. First off, we have the cover art, which honestly just depicts a romance comedy drama movie. There's nothing here that indicates this was supposed to be about dinosaurs in any way, but maybe the Brontosaurus did play a bigger role. It is described as a pesky and naughty dinosaur, so maybe it had one or some of its own slapstick comedy sequences in the movie. But we can at least see what the Brontosaurus looks like because there is a surviving still from the movie, which shows the head of what I'm assuming is the Brontosaurus at least, attacking one of the main characters on the ship. The caption up top simply says, "The monster rose from the deep in 1926 to threaten May McAvoy and Ben Lyon in The Savage, a rarely seen silent produced by First National." We get an even better view of the dinosaur in this image that I found on a site called Wikidot, though it's labeled to be a giant plesiosaur instead of a brontosaurus. Although I'm assuming that's mainly just them confusing it, but I could be wrong. Maybe this was a plesiosaurus, whatever. What's also funny about this movie is that it was possibly intended to serve as a spoof or parody of 1925's The Lost World, which was released just a year prior to The Savage and was also produced and distributed by First National. And those were a handful of lost dinosaur movies from the silent era. Again, the chances of ever seeing these movies again is pretty low, but I love the fact that they were documented in some way or another so we can at least hear about how they were. Personally for me, that's why I love making the kind of content that I make. A part of the reason why I make this content is to contribute with documenting and hopefully preserving information from Paleomedia that I feel shouldn't be forgotten. And I really appreciate you guys supporting my endeavors in doing that. Thank you all so much for watching, and please, have a nice day.